is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 392. My name is Marshall. I'm actually in sunny Las Vegas, Nevada, looking out the window of my hotel room, as opposed to in Seattle, where I'm normally at. On the line, though, as usual, from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, you feeling better, buddy? You had a pretty rough day yesterday.
Yeah, I was kind of sick in bed all day yesterday, but things are good. It's even sunnier here, maybe in Denver. I don't know. 93 degrees is the high today.
Holy, so. It's going to be 93?
Yeah, I went for a walk this morning, and it was a balmy 70s. That was nice. But
wow, you know how hot it is here right now?
78.
It is 93.
Oh, there we go.
So we're in the same thing. Although somehow I'm in Vegas and you're in Denver. That's very strange to have the same weather. So this week on the show, we've got Sealed. We're going to talk about Sealed. We hear you. We see your requests for these things. We know, Sealed Deck, of course, really important part of the limited ecosystem these days, because it is generally the format of the more high-level tournaments, at least at the beginning of them. Think Grand Prix. If you're going to go to your first or, go to a Grand Prix in your area and it's limited, you're going to be playing Sealed for all of day one. And so, you really need to kind of get that skill locked down. And then also, of course, for all of you who are trying to get qualified for the Pro Tour, the PPTQs are Sealed Deck if you're playing a limited one. And that's really important. I mean, playing Sealed is a very valuable skill. And while a lot of things translate from draft, a lot do not. And we're going to talk about the specifics for Amonkhet on the show this week. Before we get into our main topic, of course, I want to recognize our sponsor, channelfireball.com. Make sure you go to grandprixvegas.com to get any information you need about the massive GP that's coming up next weekend. Luis and I are going to be there. I'm already here in Vegas. I'm going to be doing some World Series of Poker stuff, but then when the GP comes up, I'll be full timing over there and then back to hanging out again. But this is, it's just going to be like one of the most insane GP weekends ever. I have really high expectations. They're running 3. Like, was that your idea, Luis? Like, 3 GPs in one weekend? Whose idea was that?
I actually don't know whose idea it was. I'm going to assume it was Helene Bourgeot because she's great. R.I.P. Helene. But yeah. I do think that it's going to be a really fun weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Legacy, Limited, and Modern. It's June 15th through 18th. So coming up pretty quickly, but it's not too late. You might be able to come out and play one of these events, or even all 3, if you can book it in time. As far as content goes, one of the things I love about Channel Fireball, I've always loved about it, ever since the first day I saw it, back when like John Lauk still wrote for CFB, was the free content. It's just nice. It's like, I want to get up to date on the latest stuff in Magic. You're here listening to this podcast, so I'm sure you think the same way that I do. And, I went to some websites and I'm like, I have to pay for this? Like, this feels weird. I'm coming here to spend money on your site potentially. And, I don't want to have to spend extra money for this content just to get it in time. And Channel Fireball never had that. I really appreciated that, when I first started playing again, because I could just read up on all the latest and greatest stuff from some of the better players in the game as well, including Paulo Vitor Damarosa. He did a written and a YouTube clip about tiny edges, which is, talk about a subject near and dear to my heart, Luis. I love going for those small edges. Caleb Durward has some modern Death Shadow videos up, and Frank Carson has a standard Equilibrium for you constructed players as well. So all types of cool content from awesome content creators and some of the best players in the world at Channel Fireball. While you're there, singles, yep, you can get them. You can get sealed products. You can get all that kind of stuff at channelfireball.com. Please do check them out. Also, the show is brought to you by you via the Patreon. This is really just a godsend for the podcast. I don't think we'd still be here today if it weren't for the Patreon and the people who support the show on there. I wanted to say thank you. Personally, we really appreciate every bit of support that we get. It's very easy to get set up, and you can choose how much you want. You choose your own level of involvement, and that's patreon.com/limited resources. One of the cool things you get is you get access to the Patreon feed, and this is a place where I can put stuff related to the podcast that only patrons can see. It's like special little perks. So like if you want to see Luis lying on a hotel bed, for example, wearing a t-shirt that I bought him.
No one wants to see that.
You can do that. I'll do little updates about the show too. That we were planning on recording yesterday, but Luis was sick, so I put up a little update to just said that, just little things like that. And sometimes I'll poll the patrons for questions for a special guest or for a special episode of the show, that kind of thing. But also you get to ask questions. You get to ask questions for the Patreon question of the week. We'll have a thread that I refresh every month or two to let you guys ask us what you want. And this one comes from Lindsay Chrysler, who says, "Hi guys, love the show. I'm going to my second GP in Vegas." Hey, Lindsay, we'll be here too. Last time I was so surprised by how everyone was ready for their matches way earlier than I was. Maybe I'm drinking too much tea and peeing too much. Maybe. But you guys have any time-saving tips for in-between rounds? Any rituals that work well for you? Love. Lindsay. Thank you, Lindsay, for the question. Luis, you've played in a million GPs. It's probably been a while for you to remember what it was like to go for your first time. But what is your routine for in-between rounds to make sure that you're seated and ready to go, with a pen in hand, a paper, a dice, a playmat, all the stuff that you bring to you for a round at a GP?
I tend not to do a whole lot specifically between rounds. I certainly don't play games in between rounds. I tend not to like to do that. I make sure I have a pen most of the time, and I found that you need to have kind of whatever works for you. Like some people don't feel prepared unless they have a bag with dice, paper, extra pen, their playmat, all those things. But I'm of the minimalist approach. I tend not to worry too much about that stuff. Actually, on a logistical note, especially when the bathrooms are crowded and whatnot, you can go to the bathroom during the round. You just call for a judge and let them know. And no, you're not asking. Like the judges can't tell you that you can't go to the bathroom.
Right.
That's not how it works. You're an adult. You get to go to the bathroom. So
right.
I don't. If there's like, if the round has ended and you had like a long match and you're like, oh, I don't know if I'll have enough time. Just wait. When your round starts, just try to be fast. Be respectful of the time, but don't worry too much about it. Like we're humans. This is how we work. So. I wouldn't say that there's any one specific way you need to be, but do whatever it takes to keep you in just like a kind of calm and level mindset.
Yeah. And as far as getting to your seat in time and that kind of thing, the GPs are run in different ways. I would expect that going into next year, we'll see some consolidation of that with CFB events taking over for the GPs. But, as it stands now, some of them use printed out papers on board. Some of them use screens. Some of them update, most of them will update some type of a website that you can look at. And I think the key is just to kind of be ahead of it. The thing that you realize after you go to a few GPs, but you can pick it up if you know about it ahead of time, is that there's a cadence to it. Right. I know when the round's about to be paired based on just where people are standing and when they're starting to hover around the boards or when they all have their phones out. You can just feel it. And there's really a rhythm to it. And I think it's important to follow that, because if you're just one little half step ahead, the kind of hovering by the board where your last name's at, or you've got your phone out and you're kind of doing the refresh thing, waiting for the next thing to come up, you can be right on top of it and make sure that you get there. Cause I know that for some players, it's hectic, right? I mean, you're all over the place. There's 1,500 players and they're all trying to get to the same place at the same time. And it all kind of can be a mess. But I think that there is something to be said for getting there to your seat a bit early, just because it lets you sit down, kind of take your deck box out, get your deck ready, and not feel like you're behind when you haven't even played a land yet. It just can help get you mentally calm if you're just ahead of the curve a little bit on that. So I would try to be proactive, Lindsay, about making sure that you know when and where the pairings are going to go up, whether it's on your phone or a screen or a board, and then kind of be there beforehand. And like I said, you'll know. People will start kind of hovering around or standing around as the round goes up. Also, one other thing to note when you're at a Grand Prix is that there's a round timer that goes. It starts at 50 minutes and it counts down, and then it starts counting up. And you can always see that. They have it projected or screened or somewhere on the wall. You just look around you, and when you see a big clock, that will be the one. And that will give you an idea as well. Because remember, it's not like the round gets paired at 50 minutes. It actually takes another 10 to 20 minutes after that for all the rounds to finish any match that goes to extra turns and that kind of stuff. And then also they have to get all the results slip in, every single one, and then they have to pair the new round and get that distributed. So that usually takes between 10 and 20 minutes on top of the 50. So if you look at that clock and it says it's at 12 minutes, that means that it's gone past 50 and counted 12 up, and that means you're getting pretty close. But if it's at 36 minutes, that means you've got a lot of time. You can go get a burrito or whatever. Thanks so much for the question, Lindsay. We do appreciate it, and we'll see you in Vegas. Let's do a little crack-a-pack here. Luis, I don't know what to make of this. This says this pack says 2 LR from the Italian Mafia.
All right.
So hopefully that's the name of a playtest team and not the actual Italian Mafia. But either way, thank you. I don't remember somebody bringing a card to me looking like they might shoot me. All right. First card out, Sparring Mummy.
Sure hope we're not first picking that.
Yeah, I hope not too. I mean, the cards ended up being pretty decent in certain decks. You know, it does have good synergies with Exert primarily. So I think that, you know, you can play this card in a green-white Exert deck and get extra Exerts going, which is kind of good. Heckma Sentinels. You kind of like this card a bit early in the format. Where have you settled on it?
I think it's a fine card. I end up playing it in my blue decks most of the time. I'm not taking it particularly early, though.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of where I ended up too. 2/3 ends up being a reasonable blocker in the format, and the threat of activation's okay too.
It is. I'm never unhappy casting this on turn 3. It interacts fine with pretty much the whole format. And if you leave it back as a 2/3 with some mana up, even just 1 mana, often your opponent can't really attack into it.
Yeah, 3/4 is legit. Like that even blocks some of the exert creatures if they're exerted. Ugh, the finisher. Manticore of the Gauntlet is next, Luis. The 5 mana 5/4 Manticore. He puts a counter on something and it does 3 damage to your opponent. God, I've lost to that card a lot. That reach, that you know, that extra 3 damage at the end when people are playing, you know, some of these more all-in style decks really adds up. It's brutal.
Yeah, it's a fine card. Probably the best of what we've seen so far, but still not a card I'm really that thrilled with.
Oh God, if we have to first pick it, I'm just walking out of here. All right, well, this one's worse, but I really like it. It's Supply Caravan. I have a weak spot for camels.
Supply Caravan is a fine card.
Is it? God, I just really don't think it's good, man.
If you need a 5-drop, it's a 5-drop. It's not a card I'm thrilled about, though.
Yeah, it's it's below replacement level, so that's probably not a great thing. But it's so cool. Like it has a companion. Anyway, Haze of Pollen, no. Dissenter's Deliverance, no. Oh! Cartouche of Strength. Luis, can I interest you in a Cartouche of Strength?
Yes, Cartouche of Strength is a card I am actually happy to first pick.
Yeah, we recognized this one very early in the set review and said, wait, this card's just fantastic. And somehow it is absolutely lived up to that billing. It is really good. Evolving Wilds, I'm not going to first pick it.
Cartouche of Strength is a pretty high bar.
Yeah, it really is. Like in my mind, there's not that many commons that we'd want over it. There's a list, but it's not too many. I'll tell you what, our last common is not one of them. It's Impeccable Timing. We both recognize that this got a little bit better from the last time it was printed, but it's still not one of those cards that I'm prioritizing.
Yeah, I do think that the card is playable, but I don't think it's nearly as good as Cartouche of Strength.
All right, well, let's see if we can beat Cartouche of Strength. How about Sacred Excavation? 3 and a blue sorcery, return up to 2 target cards with cycling from your graveyard to your hand.
I mean, it's a card I like playing, but it's not a card I'm taking early. This is the kind of card that if you don't wheel it, then you probably shouldn't be trying to play it.
I think if you do wheel it, you should probably not try to play it too. It is so unbelievably slow. Even though like you can get creatures back, like it often just gets you straight up 2 spells. Draw 2 spells for 4 mana sorcery speed, though, is like still, not great in this format. And it's certainly not, competing with Cartouche of Strength. All right, here's a solid little playable. Battlefield Scavenger. This is the 1 in a red 2/2 Jackal Rogue. And when you exert a creature, and you can, of course, exert it if you'd like, you can rummage. You can discard a card to draw a card.
I do like this card. I think it's quite strong. Just the fact that it's a solid 2-drop and then lets you cash in cards later also works with the numerous other exert creatures. But yeah, I like Cartouche of Strength more.
I do too. I think it's significantly better. All right. Contender acquired. Cast Out.
All right. Cast Out is a fine card. It's not as good as it first looked, I think. I think the card is good. You're always going to play it. I think you'd be insane to like cut it from your deck and you probably should be taking it in the first couple picks in most packs. But it's not a windmill slam bomb like it looked like initially. So I think that I would take Cast Out over Cartouche of Strength, but I wouldn't fault you for going the other way.
Yeah, I'm definitely cast outing here. All right. Well, There's good news and bad news. So we've got a rare, but we've also got a foil uncommon, so that's kind of cool. The rare is Harvest Season. Ugh.
Oh, it's not even close to playable.
No, 2 and a green sorcery. Search your library for up to X basic lands. Put them on the battlefield. Tap where X is the number of tapped creatures you control. No. All right. But we do have another uncommon, and it's a pretty good one, though I don't think it's quite as good as Cast Out. It's Start to Finish. So start is 2 and a white instant. Make 2/1/1 white warriors. And then finish is 2 and a black sorcery. Sack a creature. Destroy a creature.
This is a very good card. I've been quite impressed with it, and
Same.
it's a reason to go into black-white. I think I'd still take a monocolor card here. This would be third after Cast Out and Cartouche.
I have it exactly the same. Man, I wanted to argue with you, but I don't think I can.
Look, people like when we argue, but I don't think we're supposed to argue when we don't believe it.
No, that's kind of a rule we made on the show way back in the day. It was like, because people do, like, they appreciate a good little back and forth, but you can't really force it, Okay, so let's get into Sealed Deck here, Luis. The cool part about doing the Sealed episode is that a lot of this ground is already covered by draft, right? I mean, you still get to feel out, individual card quality. All the things that we just said about these cards is still the same in the sense that, we know how powerful each one of these cards are individually. The challenge that we face is what's the difference? What's the difference in the Sealed format that makes us adjust our ratings? Because I'll tell you what, if you sit down to play a Sealed Deck tournament and you just translate your draft ratings directly to Sealed, you are making a horrendous error and you are going to give up a lot of win percentage points by doing so. So the first thing that you should do is sort of reset. Like, you don't want to reset fully. Like, it's too much work. It's too much workload, I think, to just think, I'm just going to reevaluate literally every card under the guise of Sealed. But at the same time, you really need to have an open mind about reevaluating each of these cards and figuring out how they fit into the strategies that are successful in Sealed versus the ones that are in draft. So let's go big picture here. What about like a kind of a general picture on Amonkhet Sealed?
So this is one of the Sealed formats that has the biggest difference between Sealed and draft, which is why such things it's useful to talk about it. Because there have been some Sealed formats where, maybe it's a little bit slower. Maybe you're playing like splashing more often, but generally the cards that are good and the cards that are bad are bad. That's not really the case here.
No.
Because Amonkhet draft is very aggressive. You want 2-drops, you want 1-drops. And if you don't have something to play in the first, like if you don't have a 2-drop in draft, it feels like you're significantly behind, especially on the draw.
Oh God, it sure does.
Like it feels like you're just going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Sealed, it's very much not like that. I will admit I cheated a little bit in preparation for the Sealed episode. I've only done 2 Sealeds, but I talked to Michael Jacob a lot because I worked.
And he's done a lot of Sealeds.
He's played 156 matches of Sealed. He tracks it all on a spreadsheet.
Oof.
So
I did about 10 Sealeds, but I'm not touching it. Oh my God.
Yeah,
all right.
So he's played 50 Sealeds or something like that, 40 Sealeds depending on how many rounds he plays. So I think that we're going to end up looking at a much slower format here.
Yes. And
I don't know what your experiences have been, but from the looks of things, it's not only slower, but much slower.
Yeah, it's funny. The way to like snapshot my take on it is, remember what we thought the format was going to be? That's what the Sealed feels like.
Right. That's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah. It's like when you looked at the set, Luis and I, we talked about this in the review, but we were like, there's all these grindy things like cycling and embalm and aftermath. And we're going to be kind of, it's going to be a card advantage game and we're going to be really kind of grinding. And then people started playing 1 and 2 drops and running everybody over. And so we had to adjust. And after making the adjustment, I actually quite like the draft format. I'm still drafting it. And it's pretty fun, but I have to say that the Sealed has been a real breath of fresh air because all of those things that we thought about how embalm would work and how card draw would be good, and there's these build around big cards and splashy stuff, that kind of is how the Sealed format actually feels when you play it.
Yeah, it is. The cards that cost 4 or more determine games a lot more than in draft, and as a result, you're seeing stuff like splashing more often. You're seeing finishers be more important. Your greater sandworms go up in value. And I think one way to kick things off is look at what your average deck might look like.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it.
So looks like 2 colors and a splash So 2.5, whatever you want to call it, because of cards like Evolving Wilds, and because of the desire to play good finishers or cards like Cast Out, cards like Final Reward. 17 lands you want to play first. And this is something I will admit I would not have gotten to in my experience, but MJ was very, very adamant about it. He only wants like 3 or 4 cards that cost 3 or less, or 2 or less rather.
That's like interesting.
He doesn't want a lot of 2-drops. He thinks that 2-drops are actively bad. Like, yes, Gus Walker is good because that card's good at any point, but cards like Nefcrop and Tangler, they just get blanked more often if you don't actually have the aggro punch to finish the game.
Yeah, and that is the key, is that I think what he's hitting on here is when you played Draft and you play those really aggressive decks, they are a very specific mix of cards that make those decks great, right? Like that make the curve outs and the sort of my opponent didn't really get to play or never really got to block. Those type of things require a specific recipe in a specific order. And it's not impossible. It's actually, pretty reasonable to set those sequences up if you're drafting that deck correctly. But in Sealed, of course, you just don't get those pieces. And if you take out a few of those pieces, that whole strategy looks so much worse. It's laughably bad if you don't have all of the things in order. An example for this, Luis, would be like, take an average mid-range deck in Limited, right? If I took 3 cards out, let's just say I just chose 3 cards to take out and replace them with crappier versions of whatever they do. That deck would lose a little bit of win percentage, but still largely function close to what it would have before. But if you take a hyper-aggressive deck that has cards that say, your opponent can't block this turn, and like Cartouche of Zeal and these type of cards that are very just narrow, specific but powerful cards, and I just took 3 cards out, I could easily upset the balance of that deck, taking it from a pretty good deck to kind of a mediocre deck that really needed specific draws. And in Sealed, it just sort of reflects that, right? You just don't often get all of the pieces that you need, because we're not just talking about specific cards either. We're talking about curves as well, right? I mean, you need those 1-drops, you need a lot of 2-drops, and you might just not get them.
Kind of the classic problem about going aggro and Sealed, and Ben Stark talked about when he was on. We've talked about it almost every Sealed episode. You don't get the support, so even though your deck looks close to a draft deck, it's not there, and it's not there in enough of the ways that make the whole thing fall apart. Like a mid-range deck, like you're mentioning, can lose a couple cards and still kind of function the same way.
Yeah.
An aggro deck just can't. When you have 3 2-drops in your aggro deck, guess what? You're not really playing an effective aggro deck.
Yeah.
You want, 8 2-drops or, between 1s and 2s. And it's just going to be very, very hard to end up building that in Sealed, which means if you go for it and fail, you end up in a much worse spot than if you just try to build a deck that has a good game plan throughout the game without needing to curve out.
Yeah. And, it is funny because this is where I think our listeners can get the biggest edge, right? Because let's just say you're an experienced drafter, right? You've drafted this set 10 plus times or whatever. And, you feel pretty comfortable. You've listened to the show every week. You've read some articles. You're like, okay, I get what this format's about. You can be really aggressive. If you're not, you have to tune your deck against the aggressive decks to make sure you don't get ran over. Well, let's say that you didn't really put a lot of thought into it, and you sat down at a PPTQ and opened up your Sealed pool. And you're like, oh, I've got some pretty good red and white cards. This doesn't look like a good draft deck, but I know that this is a strategy that's good in this format, so I'm just going to run it. You could be making a grave error, right? Like you could easily just be spewing off a ton of win percentage because you're going to sit down and your deck is going to miss beats. Period. It's going to miss beats. It's going to have, less desirable cards like Nimbleblade Kenras and stuff. And your opponent's just going to be, they're going to be slower. So you might be able to get them down to 10, but you're not going to be able to get them any lower than that. And they are going to absolutely decimate you in the late game because these Seal decks, definitely have the ability to put much more of a punch in the late game, an inevitability, a card advantage. We're going to talk about that kind of stuff in a little bit, but this to me is the gap where you can make up the most win percentage is by being the person who really understands that as you put earlier, Luis, the delta between draft and Sealed is so big, and that applies to specific archetypes. That's the thing that you really want to be, is like, again, you sit down, you think, okay, I know red white's good in this format. Well, you need a very specific red white Sealed pool to make that deck good, and if you don't have it, you should be looking elsewhere.
Right, and we're not saying cut Dusk or Gustwalker from your deck. That card is great.
Yeah.
But we're saying Cartouche of Strength, maybe not what you want. Bloodlust Insider. These are the kind of cards that fall off significantly.
Whoa. You mean Cartouche of Zeal, right?
Or Cartouche of Zeal, right?
Yeah,
of course.
I do want Cartouche of Strength.
Yes, Cartouche of Strength is excellent.
Yeah.
Cartouche of Zeal is what I mean.
Yeah.
Once you start cutting, or once you start looking at these cards through the lens of like, what does this do if my opponent's at 18 and I don't have a creature on play on turn 4? Well, that gives you a better idea of what kind of cards you should be looking for.
Yes, for sure.
In terms of color preferences, the Obzon colors, green, black, and white, seem to be generally stronger than blue and red. Red because its cards tend to lean so aggressive that a lot of the premium cards in draft are just no longer premium. Like, look, Magma Spray is still very good, Electrify is still great, but you're looking at Nefcrop and Tangler and Thresher Lizard cards that you would have gladly taken first or second, or maybe not gladly, but you would have taken first or second in some drafts. Yeah, going down in value, Cartouche of Zeal, Bloodlust Insider being more of them. And blue because it's just shallow. Blue's just shallow in this set. It doesn't offer quite as much. This isn't to say that you shouldn't play those colors. If you open Vizier of Many Faces or Glorybringer, the normal sealed truism of you should put your best cards in your deck still apply.
Yeah.
I have trouble imagining opening Glorybringer and not having it in my pool.
Right.
But I think in general, like if you built 100 sealeds like MJ did, and you're going to play green, black, and white way more often than blue and red.
Yeah, I've found in my experience that green is really a cornerstone for a lot of what you're going to be doing. I've also found that green-black tends to be the place where I end up going. And yes, I agree with MJ that white ends up being the color that gets with those the most. And then a lot of the cards that you just named, Luis, are really highly sought-after splash targets. Magma Spray is something, but like Electrify and Deemworthy are cards that you see splashed a lot. And if you go to blue, there's some cards in blue, but a lot of them are double. So, you don't end up seeing those as much, like Vizier and the, what's the 5/3 flying? What's his name again?
The Glyph Keeper?
Yeah, Glyph Keeper. Cards like that are harder to splash. But what I've also seen a fair bit of, both on the other side of the table and in my pool, when it comes to green, are like fixing, right? You are able to do a 3 to 5 color deck in this format, depending on how many cards like Gift of Paradise you have. And so when you're thinking about doing your colors, I would not be closed off to the idea of being pretty ambitious with your mana if you've got multiple copies of Gift of Paradise plus, some other mana fixing, of which there's a lot in the format, by the way. Evolving Wilds, there's even the dual lands, Painted Bluffs, Naga Vitalist, the Cultivator. But really, to me, I'm looking for those Gift of Paradise to see if I have the option of just kind of playing all of my bombs, because when the format gets slow, Gift of Paradise is very legit at being able to cast splashed Glorybringers or Vizier of Many Faces, cards that if you play them at any point in the game, they're going to be very powerful. You don't want to do this for cards that are more situational or need to be cast as early as possible. But I don't care what turn it is. Glorybringer is going to be awesome, right? It doesn't matter. And if you have let's say two copies of Gifts of Paradise, I mean, you can actually make that happen for the later part of the game. You just need to make sure that you're doing enough in the early. Generally speaking, though, I like 2.5 colors being kind of the average. You are often going to be green, black, splashing red for an Electrify and a Deemworthy or whatever. These things happen all the time. And you just need to figure out what your 2 base colors are. I tend to end up in green probably more often than not, just because it is the color that has the fixing, and it's also kind of the most mid-rangey of the colors. It just has cards that you can put into your deck and not feel embarrassed about, and that's something that I look for as well, because cards like Ornery Kudu, look, that's not a great Magic card, right? But
nope. You
can play it in your deck, and in draft, it's like pretty slow and a little clunky, but in sealed, you're just like, yeah, I needed a 3-drop, where when you start looking at the other colors, the cards you were talking about, Luis, your Nefcrop and Tanglers and stuff really just fall off if you can't support them, and they become, basically unplayable. Where like a card like Kudu, it's hard to make that card unplayable, right? So I end up in green a lot for that reason as well.
Yeah, you can, once you have 2 blessings, you can actually go ahead and play or rather Gift of Paradise, you can go ahead and play almost anything in your pool, assuming because the games go long enough, you have cycling cards, and you can also often, string together like an Evolving Wild or what have you, Arash or Cultivator. Like these are all cards that can help you just play your best cards, because it does come down to playing the best cards. Another reason why green in general gets better is because its cards are all good, but like you said, by themselves and are higher curve, and that higher curve is actually where you want to be. So basically, it's what you look at what each color is doing, and the reasons that some of these colors are bad in draft are the reason they're good in sealed, and vice versa. It's actually just kind of like switching. So I do want to say that there's people always do want hard and fast rules, and that's generally not something that we provide. We are giving you general guidelines. Without getting into the debate, it's kind of like the 41 cards debate where
don't do that. Don't open up
that's even more extreme, because since it's wrong to play 41 cards or more 99.99% of the time, you should basically never do it. Here it's more like it's wrong to build a sealed aggro deck and sealed, like I think like 90% of the time that you think you should, you shouldn't.
In this set, I think it's like probably 80, 85.
80%?
Yeah,
sure.
I have had some decks where I'm like, look, I just got the pieces and the deck was unreal. Like,
if you have the pieces, you can build those decks.
It is rare though.
Yeah. And as a result, when we say green is better, it's because it's better, not because you have to play green. When we say red is worse, it's because it's worse, not because it's unplayable. And that's a pretty big difference, but trying to give you an overall like view of what most likely is going to be the case is important. Also, sealed has a lot of room for sweetness, stuff that you would not necessarily consider. Like splashing Lay Claim off of Gift of Paradise is awesome because it cycles.
Oh, yeah.
So you would never have thought to splash a double blue card with like even just one Gift of Paradise is often enough to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, because it cycles, or you can play these like sweet gold cards, or you can kind of build combo decks. Like when you have cards that combo together, that's very nice. Like Approach of the Second Sun, I think is an awesome card in sealed. I do too. Yeah. I think it's actually literally a bomb. Sandworm Convergence, Cruel Reality. These are all cards that go from, depending on how you look at them, good, basically mediocre to good to just, I think, bombs.
Yeah, actually, why don't we get into that? Because I've made a list of some of the cards and card types to consider for changing right in here. And let's start with those ones, the ones that you just talked about, right? Because I think that those are the biggest movers and shakers because they've really just fallen so out of favor in draft that like it's almost to the point that if you take those type of cards, you kind of feel bad. Like you take a Sandworm Convergence. Let's say you open up a pack that's pretty mediocre, pack one, pick one, but it has a Sandworm Convergence, which is a sweet card. And you take it, you just feel like I'm probably just giving up equity over not just taking like a random 2-drop or whatever. And now you actually get to kind of like, oh, okay, I can take this card and actually feel good about it. Or I can put this card in my deck and actually feel good about it, which is really exciting because there are so many cool cards in this set that just sort of get thrown to the wayside because of the level of aggression that you're likely to face at some point during the course of your matches. And so those ones I think are huge, right? Sandworm Convergence, Cruel Reality, Bounty of the Luxa, Oracle's Vault.
Drakehaven, I think, is a card that goes from a potential builder on. I mean, this card is good in draft too, to a card I'm like really excited to play in sealed.
Yeah, as long as you can support it. You just have to have enough, critical mass of cycling, which you don't get to control. But there's so much cycling in the set, it usually feels like you can make it work. But yeah, that's a great example too. And these are, Lay Claim is a big one. These are cards that give you something that's very, very important in this sealed format, which is inevitability. These games can really grind. I mean, really, like both players are down to 10 cards in their deck, that kind of thing. And if that situation comes up, it starts to be a question of kind of like how Mike Sigrist approached Magic, when we had him on the show, where, what if you and I sat down to play, Luis, and we just fanned out our deck in front of each other and just said, okay, well, let's just say we each get to play our spells. Who's going to win? And when you do that, you start to look for cards that win the game on their own and the answers to those type of cards, right? Like I might fan my deck out and go, well, let's say we both just kind of curve out but can't kill each other. I've got a Sandworm Convergence, so I'm probably going to win the game. But you could say, I've got a Lay Claim. I'm going to steal your Sandworm Convergence and I'm going to win the game. And I'm like, okay, well, you probably have that. And, so for me, I'm thinking, okay, let's just say if this game goes, to a naturally long game state, what is the most likely outcome? And you need to be the one that has a plan for getting to that stage and winning the game. Now, it doesn't have to be a card like Cruel Reality or Sandworm Convergence or Bounty or these cards that we've mentioned. It can be an alternate strategy that gets you there. Or it can be through raw card advantage. There's a lot of ways that you can do this, but you do need to have a plan for that, because if your deck is set up to go late and you can't win a late game, you got big problems.
You don't need one of these rare bombs to build your deck this way, but you do want something like 2 Greater Sandworms, a Colossopede, and a Desert Ceradon give you like a decent reason to try to close out the game. You have to be aware of this. Like, this is definitely a format where if you have Greater Sandworm in your hand, maybe don't cycle it on turn 2.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you have to see how the game is going to go out, but you don't want to be in a case where you don't have a win condition. Another cool synergy which gets more pronounced here is Trials and Cartouches. And this is good in draft also. I mean, everyone likes a Trial of Zeal, right? But I think even more so in Sealed, especially Trial of Knowledge, a card which I was very disappointed by in draft, but is great in Sealed. Having Cartouches, especially when you have Cartouche of Strength or Cartouche of Ambition or Cartouche of Knowledge, basically those 3 cartouches are the ones you actively want in your Sealed decks anyway. Mm-hmm. If you have synergy with Trials, then you really have the power to win a mid or long game.
Yeah, and that goes to what we were just talking about, right? Like, that's another game plan that isn't just a bomb rare that can generate you enough card advantage. And in fact, that brings us to another type of card that I want to consider, which are straight up card draw spells. Just you just mentioned Trial of Knowledge being kind of disappointing in draft for such a powerful card, and in Sealed, it's awesome. It's just great. Like, I want that card really, really bad. And you know what? I'll even play like a New Perspectives, like just to draw 3 for 6.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, Hieroglyphic Illumination goes up, and that card's perfectly playable in draft. But like, I do not want to cycle it. Like, I want to cast that card because this is a way that you can generate actual straight up card advantage over the course of the game. And that is the name of the game here, one way or the other, right? When we talk about cards like Sandworm Convergence and Cruel Reality, you might not think card advantage, but they actually are. They give you, some people call it virtual card advantage, right? When Sandworm Convergence makes you a worm every single turn, that's like you drew a card and cast it for free that made you a 5/5.
It also blanks all their flyers, which is like a lot of more virtual card advantage.
Yeah, totally. And, Cruel Reality, you're thinking, well, I don't draw any cards. That's not card advantage. But it is, because it kills one of your opponent's creatures every single turn. It's like you drew a removal spell, an edict or whatever, and had them and cast it every turn for free. And eventually that card advantage, even though it's not directly cards in hand, will win you the game. Some of the other cards, though, that we're talking about here, like New Perspectives, Trial of Knowledge, and Hieroglyphic Illumination, they're just straight up card advantage, right? They literally are just drawing you extra cards that you can use to win the game. And then, there's some of the other cards I mentioned before, like Bounty of the Luxa and Oracle's Vault, which can also generate you card advantage more directly and get you the win. So, don't overlook those. Yes, we've kind of gotten into the habit of thinking like, oh, Trial of Knowledge, I guess I'll pass it. Here, it's like that one should stand out to you. That should be a card that
I really like your comparison of because this Trial of Knowledge talk is bringing me back. The Sealed format is what we thought the draft format might be like, which is part of the reason that I think a lot of people find Sealed so appealing here. Is you get to play with cards like Trial of Knowledge and have them be the bombs that. Well, maybe we thought they were initially. Not pointing fingers, but I definitely did.
Yeah, I did too. And I mean, think about like Oracle's Vault, card I thought would be better. Bounty of the Luxa, card I thought would be better. Like you go down the line here, and I'm just like, these are all the cards I was excited to play at the beginning of the format. Realized I couldn't, made the adjustment, but now I get to kind of unburden myself a little bit with that. And
that's another card that's good, by the way.
Yes, I do have that on the list. Why don't we talk about that? Unburden and Lay Bare the Heart are 2 cards that I wanted to bring up. I found Lay Bare the Heart to be pretty good. When we are talking about some individual bomb style creatures and cards that can take over the game and that cost a lot of mana, a card like Lay Bare the Heart can be kind of a surgical weapon against them so that you can take away their Sandworm Convergence the turn before they could play it, or their Cruel Reality, or whatever else that they're trying to use to finish the game. So I like that. And then Unburden is another type of card that I think goes up. It is hard to fit in the deck. Woody's been playing a lot of Sealeds in preparation for Grand Prix Vegas, and I had a chat with him about it. He said he still has a hard time actually fitting Unburden into his lists. But, look, if your opponent's trying to cast 6, 7, and 8 mana spells to win the game, Unburden goes up a lot, because I think that there's like a mental fallacy that happens. You go, Unburden you, and they go, ditch 2 lands, and you're like, oh, I didn't get your Sandworm Convergence or whatever. But what you really did is add like 5 to 7 turns, right, on the time frame from which they can actually cast it. So even if they ditch lands, you might feel a little bummed because you didn't think that they didn't hit the spell that they wanted. But when people are playing expensive stuff, they need both lands and those expensive spells. So you are actually working yourself forward. Now, still not great though. Like, there's still embalmed creatures and stuff that make it a little worse. What's it called? Aftermath too. Well,
I think a key with both Unburden and Lay Bare the Heart is they actually go up in value the longer you wait. Lay Bare, you want to cast, and this is more applicable in games 2 and 3, you want to cast it the turn before they play whatever card you're worried about. So assuming your curve cooperates, if they have Sandworm Convergence, you'd rather play it on like turn 5 or turn 6. If they have, Glorybringer, play it on turn 4. Because it gives them more time to draw that specific card, and they're going to have targets no matter what. Obviously, if you have 3-drop, 4-drop, 5-drop, maybe you just play it on turn 2. But Unburden's even more in that direction, where you want to try to figure out how many cards they'll have every turn and try to cast it when they hit 2 cards. And one of the tricks, I just assume they can play 2 cards a turn. They go land, spell. And most of the time, you're not going to get burned. Later in the game, they might go land, spell, spell. So, let's say if they have like 3 cards in their hand right now, I can wait a turn to Unburden. But if they go draw up to 4 cards, land, spell, spell down to 1, you end up kind of losing out. So maybe worry about that. But in general, if they have 3 cards and you pass and they go land, spell, then on your next turn you Unburden them. That usually works out pretty well.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Very, very, very good. A nice shortcut too. Of course, when you're playing a game of Magic, you always have to be willing to look at the exceptions. But that's a great baseline from which to go with. One of the cards, that we've talked a fair bit about for draft has been Forsake the Worldly. And even though it's not like a big influencer in draft, it does hit a lot of things. And I'll tell you what, I'm absolutely main decking that card at this point, for Sealed. Here's some of the things. I made a list of just some of the cards that it kills. I know these will sound familiar because there are a lot of the ones that we were just talking about, but Cruel Reality, Sandworm Convergence, Bounty of the Luxa, Oracle's Vault, and also hit stuff like Edifice of Authority, which everybody plays every copy of that they get. All of the trials, which are less enticing to hit, but if your opponent is on that whole trial cartouche loop, you can find yourself in a position where it's correct to kill a trial. It, of course, kills the cartouches, which, maybe you could use in combat or something. Lay Claim, which is a huge player in Sealed. It's an absolutely critical card in the format. It gets rid of that. And then cards like, Compulsory Arrest and that kind of thing. So, there's a lot of cards that are really important. It's not just targets, right? Like, I'm not just trying to think to myself, well, I've got a target for Forsake the Worldly, so therefore I'm happy to main deck it. The bar I want is to hit something that actually matters, and this exceeds that by a lot. I mean, you literally could just kill their best card. Like,
what are your thoughts on cards like Forsake the Worldly that have Cyclone?
You're just trying to poke the bee's nest here. I'm not falling for that. Don't worry. There's a sunset show for that.
I will tell you that Forsake the Worldly is firmly within White's color pie, so I think it makes sense.
Oh God, you're out of your. I don't like you anymore. Let's just put it that way. One card that we talked about earlier was Gift of Paradise. So don't forget those. There's also the other fixing, but I really do look at Gifts of Paradise as kind of the key fixing for that. That's a really, really important one. You talked about the trials and stuff. Pair them with the cartouches, but I do not play the less impactful cartouches just to try to get my trial back. I don't think that that's a winning strategy. And that's basically just the red and the white one that I try to avoid. For even if I have a trial, I still don't play those things.
Yeah, I think that if you had multiple trials, I could see playing Cartouche of Solidarity, the white cartouche, but even then I wouldn't be super thrilled. Yeah, if I had two Trials of Ambition, Cartouche of Solidarity actually sounds pretty good. Cartouche of Zeal is always a much tougher sell.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Big picture stuff. I've noticed that the decks fall into kind of three camps, one of them being much more predominant than the other two. The main camp are the decks that we've been talking about mostly here, which are slower decks looking to go long game, looking to leverage card advantage and big powerful spells to win the game. Okay, so that we've talked a lot about those. The exceptions that I've actually played are aggressive decks when the pieces come together. You need to be picky. Don't be forgiving of these aggressive decks. They really do need critical mass. Like Louis said earlier, you want 8 1 and or 2 drops, right? You want all the pieces to come into place. When they do, it's fantastic because everybody's playing these clunky, slow decks and you get to just run them over. And it feels easy. I mean, the best decks I've had have been these hyper aggressive decks that the other decks just simply were not capable of interacting with in a meaningful way. It's like playing a draft deck against bad draft decks. And so make sure that you are looking for those, but be picky. And then the other type of deck that pops up are these Gifts of Paradise decks, these sort of 3, 4, 5 color decks that are just like, I'm playing Lay Claim, Glorybringer, Archfiend of Ifnir, and I'm a green deck, right? Like this is my deck, this is what I'm doing. And I have seen those pop up, but I want like 2 Gifts of Paradise to make that work, plus some other fixing probably on top of it. And then what you want to do when you build those decks is make sure that you have a solid game plan to keep you alive. You do need to cast creatures to block with, like you can't just die to your opponent just simply attacking with just, medium creatures in the mid part of the game while you work out your mana situation. And then make sure and then you splash for the big upside so that you give yourself the highest card quality down the line.
I do want to add to that more cards are splashable than you might think. Cards like Final Reward, Cast Out, these are cards you should actively look to splash.
Oh, for sure.
Because you do want answers to your opponent's bombs, especially flexible ones. Even cards like Trial of Knowledge, I think, is a splashable card, especially if you already were going to play like a Cartouche of Strength in your black-green deck. And yep. you should widen kind of your range on what you think is worth splashing. Again, this is a bit of a leap from draft, because in draft, you just basically never splash. Very rarely do you end up splashing. And
you prefer not to, for sure.
And here, I think that you prefer to splash. You're more likely going to. I guess I think that a common mana-based configuration is going to be something like 7/7/2 in an Evolving Wilds. I think Painted Bluff's very reasonable, especially if the splash card is single color or not that expensive. Like Splash and Cast Out of Painted Bluffs is more than fine. Yeah,
you also get Naga Vitalist helps with that as well.
Yep, and you end up basically you need to kind of reformat how you look at the format, because it is just a very different world, and it is interesting that if you just use the same heuristics, if you use the same assumptions, then I think you're going to end up not being in a good place.
Yeah. And, the thing that I really think that you should focus on with those slow decks is that inevitability. I've got a story about a match that I played that sort of highlights that. And you mentioning Cast Out just now reminded me of it, even though it's not involved in the story directly. It shows the sort of leveling that happens when both players are trying to set up inevitability. So what happened is I ended up playing Sandworm Convergence. I had it in my deck. I got to 8 mana. I played it. And I said, go. I made a worm. And my opponent cast Vizier of Many Faces, copying the worm. I thought, okay, that's just great. So it comes back to me. I attack. They trade. I'm like, okay, play something. Go. Make another worm. They're like, okay, Embalm, Vizier of Many Faces, copy the worm. I'm like, okay. I attack the next turn. They block again. I'm like, this is fine. I make another worm. And over the course of the next 2 turns, I make a worm, and they compulsory rest both of the worms. Now, at this point, I'm like, okay, I know what's going on, right? Like they are trying, I assumed like Forsake the Worldly or something, they were trying to dig. And so I started thinking about, well, what are the outs my opponent can have? And the 3 I came up with was Cast Out, Forsake the Worldly, and Lay Claim. And so now I'm trying to race. Like, I'm just like, because I know that they're digging, like they're throwing away cards on these worms, which is a horrible long game strategy. So I know that they're going for something not long game. They're trying to get to something and still be alive. And they're blue-white. And so I start jamming and I start throwing away creatures on the ground just to get in for extra damage, just trying anything I can, because I know that it's just a race against the clock. And boom, they found Lay Claim. They stole my Sandworm Convergence and they won the game with it. And I started thinking to myself, you start to think in these extreme senses, right? You're like, well, okay, what can I do, right? Like, do I have a Forsake the Worldly that I could bring in and splash for, right? Because if the game's going to come down to this, I need an answer for Lay Claim. Do I have what's it called? A cast out, right? Like that's a catch-all that I can use to get rid of some important cards like Lay Claim or cards like that. That's the mentality you need to have when those matchups pop up is, how far can I go down the line to ensure that I have the last answer, that I can answer the thing last and give me the advantage that I need if we're going to fight over one card like this. And, when it comes to draft, these things don't even pop into my head, right? Like I'm not even on this level at all because it's just like, you're just thinking about not dying, right? Like, much, much sooner than this. This is kind of the opposite of this. This is going much further down the line and thinking of just having those cards. One other thing I have to say too, Luis, you mentioned, hey, think twice about cycling, your expensive cards, because some people do that kind of willy nilly. It's like, oh, I've got 4 lands and I've got this sandworm. Yeah, I'll just cycle it. You got to be really vigilant about those things, especially cards like Forsake the Worldly and Cast Out, which I realize people aren't really cycling Cast Out that often, but they do cycle Forsake the Worldly. And oh boy, you will kick yourself if you play your Sandworm Convergence and they go Cast Out and you cycled your Forsake the Worldly because you just kind of didn't have anything else to do early. Think long game with those things. If you need to do it, but do it because you need to, not just because you kind of don't really have anything else going on. Those are really important answers to keep in your deck for later.
Another thing to think about too is part of the reason you cycle aggressively in draft is if you don't curve out, then you're often far behind. In sealed, that isn't the case. So again, really think about what you want to cycle before you cycle it, because it's not like if you miss your 3-drop, you're dead. So therefore, cycling Sandworm when you have lands 4 and 5 still means, yeah, you might miss your 3-drop more often, but it's more important to play the Sandworm on 7 than it is to try to get another shot at a 3.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, why don't we wrap this up with some key points that we have as we leave. So what are the big picture takeaways for somebody? Let's say our listeners listening right now, and they're like, okay, tomorrow morning I'm going to a PPTQ. I'm going to sit down with 6 booster packs and I'm going to open them. What are the key things that they need to know before they do that?
Play your best cards, build for a slightly slower format, aggressively splash, and try to make sure you not only have a good plan for the late game, but answers to your opponent's plan for the late game.
Yeah. Along those lines, inevitability matters, right? The ability for you to set up some type of an engine, whether it's card advantage, actual card advantage, virtual, whatever, repeatable effects, cards like the ones we've been talking about, Approach of the Second Sun. I agree with you, by the way, Luis. I think that card is fantastic in sealed. It's a way to win the game that is very difficult to interact with. Cruel Reality, Sandworm Convergence, we talked about those as well. There's a whole bunch of other ones that we touched on as well. These repeatable effects that just happen. Planeswalkers, right? Like Liliana's another one that's great for this. These are the cards that are going to win you the game if the board stalls out. So make sure that you keep that in mind when you're doing it. And then, of course, curving out, much less important. You do not need to worry nearly as much about getting ran over. So you got to play the board, right? Defensive speed. Keep that in mind that you do need to make sure that you're playing things that affect the board, because people still play creatures and they're going to just attack you with them if you don't. So you can't just ignore that. But goodness sakes, you just take a deep breath. If you've been drafting a lot, you're just not going to get ran over at the frequency that you do in draft. And so, you can start to focus for down the line a little bit. And also the last takeaway is that I really like the sealed format. Like I started doing these sealeds more just to prep for this episode of the show, and I just keep doing them. I just have been really enjoying it. I kind of like it's like a fresh look at the format. It just feels totally different to look at these cards under a different lens and have the difference be palpable. I mean, it is really a different feeling format. And there's so many cards that I've kind of written off a while ago that I get to revisit. And I think that's really fun. I mean, sure, it's still sealed. I don't get to build around them specifically very often, but still I like the idea of opening up a Bounty of the Luxa and being like, ooh, this might be sweet. I might be able to do something great with this, right? Rather than thinking yeah, right, I'm going to cast 4 mana and I'm going to get hit for 19 or whatever. So enjoy it. I think the sealed format's actually really worth looking at, and it's been a fun one.
Yeah, I I agree. I think that if you want to play a format a little bit more like what we thought the format was like, you've got outs here.
Yeah, you do. All right, that's going to do it for the show this week. I'm still in Vegas. I'm going to be here for a while. Are we going to record together? Maybe.
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, I haven't really figured out the scheduling, but possible recording here from Vegas. But either way, of course, we'll be here next week. And if you're coming out to the GP in Vegas, come say hi. You know where to find us. We're by the coverage area. We're going to be bringing you coverage the whole weekend. Again, grandprixvegas.com if you want to come out. It's not too late. It's getting to be too late, but it's not too late. You can still get signed up and play either Legacy, Modern, or Limited, whichever GP you want, or even play multiples. And while you're there, make sure you check out channelfireball.com, the main site for everything you need Magic related. They have great customer service. We hear about that all the time, and it makes me proud that they're a sponsor of the podcast, just because, we know that I know that when we send you to Channel Fireball, that you're going to be taken care of, and they're going to make sure that you're happy, because they're long-term thinkers like we are. And that means a lot to me as a show, because I know that you guys trust what we say on the show, and I wouldn't send you somewhere that I wouldn't go myself. And I do. I go to Channel Fireball. I have for a long time. If you want to find us on social media, that's also easy. I'm Marshall_LR, and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com, including links to all of our different stuff, the YouTube channel, our streams, all that kind of stuff is there right on the front page, so that you can find it nice and easy. That is going to do it for the show this week. We'll talk to you next time. Okay,
all right, Marshall, what do you got for us here?
I've got two things. Oh, God. So we're going to do a Let's Stop Vargas this week. I've got a warm-up pack for you here. And then I'm going to unleash.
Pack, all right.
And then I'm going to unleash the big gun on you. I'm going to tell you what that is in just a second. Let's just say Let's Stump Vargas Gauntlet Edition. So this first one, though, it says 2 limited resources from the Game Club in Sheldon, Iowa. Thank you. I appreciate that. The Game Club.
Yeah, I remember meeting. Do
you remember meeting him? Yeah.
Yeah, with the guy who ran it.
Yeah,
a couple
really,
times
really nice
in Omaha.
guy. Yeah, he came up to us in Omaha, and I just think it's so cool what he's doing there, running a game club out of the high school, so that people have a place to go and learn the game and interact with people that are like-minded and that kind of thing. I think that's just awesome. So big shout out to the Game Club, and thank you for the pack. This one is Mirrodin Besieged. How do you feel about Mirrodin Besieged?
I think I do pretty well on Mirrodin Besieged. At least I hope so.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, first card out. God, I wonder how I'm going to actually cover these and see how I would do. Quicksilver Geyser.
Oh, Jesus! No, okay, yeah, I think I remember this one now. I think this bounces 2 permanents, and it costs like a ton of mana.
That is true. You know what color it is?
It's blue. Yes, it's. Right. I think it's like. I want to say like blue 5.
It's not that expensive.
Maybe it's blue 3.
It's 4 and a blue, and it's an instant. Return up to 2 target non-land permanents to their owner's hands. I'm still giving you credit for that because I like you. Ardent Recruit.
Wow, how am I? Maybe I wasn't as good at Mirrodin Besiege as I thought. Ardent Recruit?
Yeah. Hold on. What if you do better at the Gauntlet? This will be hilarious.
I'm actually bricking here.
All right, Ardent Recruit is white for a 1/1.
Okay. I'm still completely bricking.
Metalcraft.
Oh, +2/+2. Gotcha.
There you go. Copper Carapace.
Oh,
or Carapace, if you will.
Yes. This is I think it's like 2 to cast, 4 to equip, +2/+2.
Jesus,
equipment.
It's 1 to cast, 3 to equip, +2/+2, and can't block.
Oh, and can't block, right.
Okay, you got to, well, maybe
I got to tighten up a little bit.
Yeah, we'll tighten up here. Ogre Resistor. I'm going to give you a hint. It only has flavor text.
Is this like I want to say a 5-mana 5/5, but
that's very close. You're on the right track. This is the red one though. It's 2 red.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 4/3, just a 4/3. It says he didn't have a word for home, but he knew it was something to be defended. Very dumb. All right, you got to get this one. Leonin Sky Hunter.
White for a 2/2 flying.
Correct. Flare Husk. Do you remember this one?
Yeah, this is a 1 mana living weapon +1/+1. and equip 2.
That's correct. Yeah. What did you think about Living Weapon?
It was pretty fun to play with.
It was kind of okay,
I think
right? Yeah.
that it is an interesting mechanic, and I think it played out pretty well in Limited. Batterskull kind of being ridiculous aside.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a little much. Vivisection. I think I played a little. I think I played a little too much Vivisection in my day.
This is like some weird blue card. You like sack a creature to draw cards.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's like, yeah. You can throw a guess at me, but you got
it's like
it.
2 and a blue, sack a creature, draw 3 or something.
Yeah, it's 3 and a blue, but otherwise, yes, you're getting credit for that one. Do you remember what Phyresis does? Wow, I totally did not.
This is like some terrible black enchantment.
It is. In fact, I'm going to give you credit just based on that alone.
I think if you put it on the creature, and then when the creature dies, they lose life equal to its toughness or something.
No, it's not that one. I know that one you're talking about. This one is 1 and a black. The creature gets infect. But you got full credit for terrible black enchantment. Phyrexian Digester. This is a colorless Phyrexian creature.
Yeah, this. How do I not get any of these? Because I know this isn't Phyrexian mana.
The reason you don't get it is because it's a small set. We drafted for like a few months.
This is like I want to say it's a 3 mana 2/2 infect.
Close enough. It's a 3 mana 2/1 infect. But I'm giving that one to you. I think I played a little too much of this guy too. Scourge Servant.
I'm just off it. I somehow don't know any of these cards.
This is a 4 and a black 3/3 infect.
Okay.
I know you know this one. A Quarter Paladin.
Yes, this is 1 and a white 3/1 battle cry. So when it attacks all other creatures, attacking creatures get +1/+0.
You're not doing that bad, by the way. Like, I know it feels like it, but like you've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've got 7 correct and 4 incorrect. That's like not that bad. Brass Squire. Oh, I remember this guy. I would have not remembered it based on the name for what it's worth, but
it's probably a 1/2 of some kind.
It's a 1/3 for 3.
1/3 for 3. I don't know what it
the key is. It's its special ability. The picture is like this little mirror, like a little orange mirror, holding a huge sword on his back.
Oh, this is the when it's like equipped, it gets +3/+3 or something.
No,
+2/+2.
This is the weird one.
Oh, it taps to move an equipment.
Yes,
I remember this now.
That's it. You did it. Yes. How about Quilled Slagworm?
4 green for like a 7/7 trample.
It's an 8/8 with no abilities. It's all flavor text. Hellkite Igniter. This is our rare, by the way. You made it to the end of the pack.
Oh God, somehow. Hellkite Igniter.
Yeah, I'll give you a hint. It's the dragon.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. Probably like 5 red for a 5/5.
Yes, that is true.
Flying.
Yeah. Think dragons. No.
Probably like when you hit them, it destroys an artifact or something like that.
No, so it's flying haste, and you can pay 1 and a red to give it +X/+0, where X is
the number of artifacts that they control.
You control.
Oh, you control.
Yeah. It wasn't too bad.
All right. I did extremely medium on that.
You did medium. I agree. But that's a hard one. Like, it's funny because that's a set that I drafted. So, like, I would think, oh, yeah, I could maybe do it. I think I would have gotten like 3 of those or something. And only the ones that got played outside. All right. But now we enter the danger zone. So I was talking to Woody and I was like, hey, I'm like, help me come up with an idea for a sweet Let's Stump Vargas. And he's like, how about we do like a gauntlet? So these have been handpicked by the woodman himself.
Oh, geez.
And throughout the course. Now, we limited it to cards that are in the modern sets. That way we're not, picking like super obscure stuff. But I'm really curious to see how you do with this one because you do not. I'm going to tell you what set it's from if you want to know. Are you ready?
Okay.
Are you sure you're ready? First card up, Thunderbolt.
This is from Weatherlight. It's 1 red instant, deal 3 to the enemy player or 4 to a flying creature.
That is correct. Also reprinted in
probably like 10th edition.
Avacyn Restored.
Oh.
You do not get credit. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, good. All right. So that was your warm up. How about a card that I don't even know if a human could ever pronounce it, but it's Autochthon Worm.
Autochthon Worm. This is it's like a 10-14 trample or 9-14 trample.
That's right, 9-14 trample.
And it has Convoke.
And this is the hard part. What's the mana
cost? Like green, white, 11 or something like that.
Oh, you're close. It's this card, by the way, is just completely sure. It's 10 green, white.
All right, I wasn't really going to get that close.
All right, how about Corrupted Conscience?
Ooh, this one I know. This is from Mirrodin Besieged. It's 3 blue enchant creature. You control enchanted creature, and it is infect.
Very good. Wait a minute, didn't we just do Mirrodin Besieged? You can tell that Woody picked a couple of these with you in mind. This one's called Long-Term Plans.
This one's sweet too. This one's a Scourge. 2 and a blue sorcery. Search your library for a card and put it third from the top.
That is correct, except for it is an instant. I will correct you on that.
My bad.
Oh yeah, he definitely picked this one's Naya Charm. I didn't see quite what he did until now.
Green, red, white, instant, deal 3 to a creature, tap all creatures your opponents control, or return a card from a graveyard to your hand.
Ooh, you snapped that one off. How about Evil Eye of Ormsby-Gore?
Somehow this is way easier than Mirrodin Besieged. This is 4 and a black.
I know, you're snapping these off.
For a 3/6, can only be blocked by walls, and other non-eye creatures you control can't attack.
Yeah, non-eye. You got that. I don't know how the hell you got that. Uncle Istvan.
1 black for 1/3, and a damage dealt to Uncle Istvan in combat is reduced to 0.
Jesus, how are you doing this? Witch Hunter.
This is 2 white for a 1/1 tap to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. 2 white tap, return target creature to its owner's hand.
Close. It only does damage to players, but I'm still giving you credit for that. Woody. Lorthos the Tidemaker. He's remembering back to one of your more famous draft videos.
Yes. 5 blue, 8/8. When Lorthos attacks, you can pay 8 to tap 8 of your opponent's permanents and they don't untap.
Yeah, that is correct. Wow, you are really heating up now. How about Crystal Ball?
3 colorless, artifact, 1 tap, scry 2.
Yep. Instill Infection.
3 and a black instant, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature, draw a card.
Wow, you are heating up now, buddy. Gruesome Encore.
Oh, come on.
Oh, man.
At some other point, I'll have to tell the Gruesome Encore story.
Remember your Gruesome Encore phase?
Oh, yes. 2 and a black sorcery. Put a creature from their graveyard into play under your control, gains haste, and then sack at end of turn.
Yeah, that is right. How about Goblin Ski Patrol? Which, by the way, did they actually reprint? This is from Ice Age. Anyway, I'm still throwing it at you. Goblin Ski Patrol.
1 in a red for a 1/1.
Yep.
And I think you can pay like red to give it +2/+0 and flying, but then it dies end of turn.
Yeah, you pay 1 in a blue. It's funny. I'm going to read the non-oracle text. It's sorry, just say blue. Red. It says 1 in a red, flying and +2/+0. That's the sentence. It doesn't say anything else. And it says, at the end of turn, bury Goblin Ski Patrol. Use this ability only once and only if you control any snow-covered mountains. Of course,
well,
it's most famous for its flavor text, which is that was from Ib Halfheart, Goblin Tactician. 2 more to go. Contaminated Ground.
1 in a black, make a land into a swamp, and when they tap it, they take 3 damage or lose 3 life.
They lose 2 life.
Oh, 2 life.
Last card, Sire of Insanity.
4 red-black for a 6/4. At the end of your opponent's turn, they discard their hand.
Each player.
Each player at the end of their turn. Each player's turn, they discard.
At the beginning of each end step, each player discards his or her hand.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, you torched that, man. I don't understand. How come that one was so much easier for you?
Well, it's weird. I don't know how Woody did this, but he actually picked a bunch of cards I have very good memories of, like just from a long time ago. Like Evil Eye of Ormsby-Gore, I just thought was a really sweet card. I remember opening long-term plans in like the first Scourge pack I opened, just random things that stood out.
By the way, is long-term plans playable?
No, it was never good.
Okay, it seems bad. Well, nice work, man. You've successfully passed the gauntlet. We may need to up the difficulty rating next time.
I don't know. I feel like I did pretty bad on Mirrodin Besieged, but We'll have to see as we do Let's Stump Vargas for the next 6 sign-offs in a row.